Hey everybody, Jane here, and today I'm reviewing Stacey in the Hands of an Angry God by Thomas Keech, and it is book one of the Red State, Blue State Confessions. This book takes place in, I wouldn't call it a futuristic society, I'd call it darn close to where we are now. And the United States has been very strictly divided into red states and blue states. And like for instance, you can't even go into a blue state if you're from a red state if you are pregnant because of the different laws about abortion. So we open the book and the first thing we see is Stacey, our main character, is at the airport and she is being subjected to a pregnancy test before she can go and see her boyfriend who lives in a blue state. Blue states obviously are a lot more liberal, and they have some weird rules too, which I assume we'll learn more about in the next book. One of the things that was interesting in the blue states, however, was that they encourage consent forms for sexual partners. And I'd actually heard of people doing that now to kind of protect themselves and from men being afraid that women were going to put false claims against them for rape. And I've heard of men actually having women sign consent forms. And here's the problem with that. Let's just be honest. With sex, you can withdraw your consent at any time. So the fact that before we get into it, I say, yeah, this is cool, I'm all for it, doesn't mean I didn't at some point stop consenting. And when the consent stops, the sex needs to stop. And so I thought that was an interesting thing for them to add in the book because I'd heard people talking about that, and I'd heard that that was a thing that was happening. However, I think both in the book and in reality, it's problematic because while it can say that yes, you were wanting to have sex with that person from the get-go, it doesn't mean that you consented through the entire act and you never withdrew your consent. But anyway, so we have Stacey, and she is from a red state. Her family's from a red state, but when we start the book, her boyfriend is living in a blue state, so she has gone to visit him. A multitude of things happen, but Stacey ends up pregnant, alone, and back in her red state. At this point, she is feeling a lot of frustration because there are new laws happening all the time that are oppressing women more and more. For instance, she is no longer allowed to graduate college after having a baby. And this is something that was not the case earlier, but she has applied for an internship. She is trying to get a job. She's a lawyer or paralegal. She's in law. I believe she's a lawyer but hasn't finished college yet. She's doing an internship, and she finds out that no, since she's pregnant, nobody will give her an internship because she's not allowed to finish school because women with babies shouldn't have jobs. Also, they can take your babies away from you just because they think you're a bad person. It doesn't have to be like abuse, and Stacey has kind of a troubled past. She had a drug addiction in her youth. And I mean, she's not very old now, but I guess in her teens she had a drug addiction. And so, that is something that is a concern that she could lose her child because she had a history as a drug addict, even though she's been clean for a long time and is a professional now. So I had really mixed feelings about this book. I guess I should finish telling you what it's about because I guess I explained the atmosphere and not so much the plot. So Stacey at some point realizes that these rules suck and starts to try to get involved in a political movement to go against these rules. That doesn't happen till significantly later in the book though. So it's on the back, it's not a spoiler, but I feel like it's not as intricate to the book as one would hope or expect. But this book, I ended up giving a 3 out of 5. I really loved the world building in this book, especially with everything going on today. this book reminded me of like the steps you would take to get to the Gilead of the Handmaid's Tale. Like this was definitely very like pre-Gilead story. But because of the concerns about women's reproductive rights, and also from having grown up in a very religious society, and these states making rules very much based on religious beliefs, and the politician in charge is actually like a prophet who God talks to, and is trying to bring back a lot of the scary Old Testament rules by the end of it. Yeah. So you have just a lot going on world building wise that I loved. The world I loved, the things that were happening in the world are frightening and very believable. So I really enjoyed that. I had mixed feelings about the plot and mixed feelings about the characters, which is part of the reason this book got a 3 out of 5. And also the writing. The writing wasn't bad. There are several really good instances in this book of some really punchy dialogue, but there were a lot of times too where there was a lot of telling instead of showing, and there were a few places where it was a little bit stilted with the dialogue. Or one thing I noticed in the dialogue that kept driving me crazy was people kept saying each other's names. It would be like, Stacey, comma, whatever you want to say. And then, Tom, comma, whatever she wanted to say. So I didn't love that aspect. Like, some of the dialogue was really good, but that was something that kind of I found irksome, was the constant use of people's names in the dialogue. And again, just a lot of moments of showing or telling what's happening, but not really showing. There's a lot going on in this book, and the plot I was really intrigued about until maybe halfway through. But I feel like that all goes into spoiler territory, so we'll do a little spoiler section. All I'm going to say is that while I enjoyed the first part of the plot, I didn't love the later parts of the plot. The other thing I had with this is that Stacey, I just felt like she was not as well done as I would have liked. And I tried to put my finger on why, because we know a lot about her background. So it wasn't that she was underdeveloped per se. She has a lot of background, but it's all very relevant to what is happening now. So we see her and her family dynamics, and her family dynamics is some of the best of the story. She has a mother who she considers kind of weak and who she is very frustrated with. She has a sister who is going through some stuff. She has a brother who is, we learn at the beginning of the book, being investigated for crimes, ridiculous crimes that are not really crimes in the real world. Fetoterrorism, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but her brother is, on her brother's computer, somebody looked up something that they felt endangered fetuses, and so they're trying to prove that he looked this up for somebody who was pregnant and therefore directly put a fetus in danger. But so we have her relationship with her family. Oh, and her dad is a former drug addict who she's trying to have a relationship with, but it's kind of a mess. So we have all these family dynamics. We also have her ex-boyfriend, who is the father of her baby, and we have the man that she starts seeing, who is a man who says he's in the process of getting a divorce, but because of the laws, it's taking him like 3 years to get divorced from his wife. All of this is happening, and all of these characters are around Stacey, and she's interacting with them. And we know all this about her. We also know that she has like a past drug addiction. But I just felt like she wasn't coming to life for me. One of the big things that I felt didn't come out in this book that needed to was her feelings and relationship with her pregnancy. Her pregnancy is such a huge part of this plot. She is in a blue state when she finds out she is pregnant, and yet she chooses not to terminate the pregnancy. The pregnancy causes so many issues for her, and she doesn't really think about it as much as I would expect any pregnant woman to, but especially a pregnant woman who is having the pregnancy affect her world so much. I felt like the pregnancy was put in there for the sake of the plot, and not necessarily did I feel like we dealt with Stacey and her pregnancy, other than how the pregnancy affected her legally. You know, she's not buying baby clothes, she's not all excited about the baby, she's not, you know, we don't really understand why she's decided to keep this baby, especially once learning that her ex-boyfriend is not interested in raising this baby with her. You know, for somebody who's going through all the things she's going through, I just feel like she'd be a lot more focused on the pregnancy that's causing some of these issues. I am also going to say I really hate this cover. I think it doesn't do it justice to what we're trying to do with this book. And Stacey, this kind of acts like Stacey's going to be very mysterious and complicated, and her world is very complicated. But Stacey as a character, I don't know that she really is. Things happen to her that are complicated, and she makes a lot of bad decisions, but yeah, I didn't love the cover of this book, and especially reading it, I didn't feel like the cover works particularly well with what this book actually is. So, now that I've given you some general things about this book, I do want to get into some specifics of things that happen, and these could all be considered spoilers. I'll try not to spoil anything super, super big, but I did have some complaints about some things. So, her brother, part of the mystery of this book is what in the world was her brother looking up? And we find out it wasn't her brother looking anything up, but there was a friend of his who was over at the house Googling something. And what she was looking up, I get why they did this whole thing, but it just kind of felt really ridiculous. The whole darn thing felt ridiculous when it comes to the brother. So, the brother has a friend at school who has had sex with a boy and thinks she might be pregnant. She's not taken a pregnancy test. She doesn't know. They're about 15, 16. They're still fairly young. So she comes over to use his computer. She tells him that I don't remember what she tells him, but she's going to look at a in vitro fertilization site, because her sister is having fertility problems and she wants to, if she's pregnant, implant her egg stuff into her sister so her sister can have a baby, because her sister's supposed to be going through in vitro fertilization. And this is ultimately how they basically save the brother, that, you know, she was looking at in vitro fertilization because it's something her sister's going through and she wasn't pregnant, so it couldn't be fetal terrorism. That reveal really irritated me, and it didn't work for me. I think the author was trying to show you that fetal terrorism not only is abortion, but it's anything where fetuses are harmed. And when you have things like in vitro fertilization, a lot of times there are extra fetuses and or fetuses that aren't healthy that are sometimes destroyed. And in this world, and you know, in the current climate at times, that is a huge problem. So we're not just looking at women who had sex, got pregnant, and are using using abortion as birth control. We're also looking at women who really want to have a baby but have extra eggs. We can't have extra eggs being implanted. And you guys, if you've watched my channel for 5 minutes, you know that I'm pro-choice. I don't think that abortion should be used as birth control, but I think it is a woman's choice, and while it is complicated and sad, I don't think we should take that choice away from women. And I do, as somebody who suffers through infertility, see the complications and ramifications on those trying to get pregnant as well. And the fact that when we put fetuses' lives in this situation on such a, any damage to a fetus ever is awful, we put a lot of women's lives in danger, as well as making it so that women who really want to have children maybe can't access all fertility treatments available because of, damage to fetuses. So anyway, that's why it was in there, but I hated it. Another thing is they have branding. So basically, if people think that you're a bad person, you can be branded. And her sister, it turns out, has been branded. And if you're branded, you're basically like an outcast. And her sister's not been branded for a good reason. Some bullies came up and branded her. And she can't explain to the authorities or whatever that she's been branded, but not by the government. Like, they're branding criminals, but if you get branded and you're not a criminal, too bad, so sad. And like I said, she's 14-ish. She's never had any kind of criminal issues, this teenage child, and yet she got branded by a group of bullies. So, and that has really obviously caused problems because people are beating up these people who are branded. The branded people aren't allowed to be on the street with people who aren't branded. They have to, if you're coming on a sidewalk and they're branded and you're not, they have to move off the sidewalk and bow their heads and stuff. It's a real messed up situation. And in the world building level, I liked it, but Stacey just has all this crap going on with everybody in her family. And Stacey's relationship with her boyfriend is incredibly unhealthy. Both the dad of her baby, who we never really get to see what that conversation was. And again, I had mentioned before why she decided to keep the pregnancy and how she feels about it. But then she starts dating a married man, and he gets crazy obsessed with her. And he starts deciding that he likes, he's the one that's working with her politically to try to take power away from this religious crazy person who's making the laws. But he decides he kind of likes the misogyny laws that would allow him to have control over her. So he basically forces her into a polygamous marriage. And I get that this is a real thing, and I just want to know. I just want to know, why is it religious crazies? It's always polygamy and pedophilia. I don't know what it is. It's like, we love Jesus so much that we have to marry 20 women and have sex with 15-year-olds. That is just, it seems like all your cults, your religious cults, your extreme religious cults, that's where they go first. It's not feed all the poor. It's not, take care of everybody. The actual things that Christ did. It's let's have all the 14-year-old girls and as many wives as we can manage and suppress all of women's rights. So anyway, so that is kind of happening later in the book. And Stacey doesn't fight it nearly as much as I would have liked her to. And some of the stuff that happens to her just had me so frustrated. I liked the world and I liked where things were going, but then her obviously abusive relationship, which she should have gotten out of way ahead of time, was really frustrating, and her not seeing it and her making excuses for him. I didn't love any of that. And there is this vigilante that we don't really know anything about, and at the end, he breaks into the wedding to save her, and it turns out it's her dad. And this book, I loved for the first half of it. And then as we get more deep into the book, it felt like it just went off the rails. So I ended up kind of frustrated. This had good ideas. It had an interesting world. It had problems I could care about. And Stacey and her family weren't bad characters. As a matter of fact, other than my complaint about Stacey's feeling about her pregnancy, she is a woman in a dilemma, and I could certainly understand that. And her boyfriend, the married guy, he's kind of feeding her lines. So to a point, I was like, I don't love the cheating element, but he is telling you he's trying to get divorced, but it takes 3 years, and what do you want me to do? But as we get further in and things get more crazy, I felt like things just kind of fell apart for me. So yeah, I thought the plot started out good. It was a good idea. The way it resolved wasn't so good. I thought Stacey as a character could have been more fleshed out, even though I don't really understand why I feel that way, because like I said, we know she's a drug addict. We see her interacting with all these people. We see her being very strong sometimes. We see her being very weak sometimes. So I'm not sure what wasn't working for me other than the pregnancy thing. But this book just had a lot of potential, and I think I just was frustrated because in the end, it really kind of let me down. I do kind of want to read the next book, though, because this is an interesting world, and I feel like I would be interested in seeing what else happens, especially if we're exploring the blue states. Like if our author is going to give us kind of the flip side of, okay, this is all the bad things about going super, super religious conservative. Now let's see what the other side has to bring to the table. And hopefully the author is somebody who is very open-minded and realizes that any extreme is bad. It just is. So many things, like, I'm one of those people that I can generally, not always, but generally see, like, the good and the bad about almost anything. So I hope that this author doesn't play up that the blue is some, like, perfect world, because I feel like that isn't a perfect world either. There's some weird stuff happening in the blue world. But, yeah. This had so much potential. It had very interesting moments. The writing wasn't for me. Stacey wasn't somebody I connected with, although I felt like we had a lot of information about her, which was great. The plot was an interesting idea, but I felt like it really fell apart as we got into it. So that is my general thoughts on Stacey in the Hands of an Angry God. Has anyone else read this? What did you think? I don't believe the second book is out yet, but if you are watching this and it has been out, did you like the second book better? Did you not like it as much? Just, I guess in general, what were your thoughts on this? What are some books with a similar plot, the similar Gilead-style world that I might appreciate more than this? Ones that don't get so almost comical by the end. And the scene with her wedding, it was frightening but almost comical, because you've got her dad basically coming in on his motorcycle and solving things, and the sister and attacking people, and it was just crazy. And it went from being like a very serious book to kind of comical and I just off the rails. So if you have any other suggestions for books kind of with similar worlds, but maybe more, you understand what I'm missing probably from what I'm saying, so something I'm going to like a little bit better, please let me know in the comments below. Also, my social media is down below if you would like to connect with me off of YouTube. I am also a writer. If you enjoy books on romance, I have several that are available basically anywhere books are sold. I do have a dystopian world, so if you like books like this, world-wise anyway, my novel Educating Autumn, which was the first one I'd ever written, is in a dystopian religious world where women don't have a lot of rights, and there is division. There's 3 countries. One super conservative, women don't have rights. One that is a matriarchy, men don't have many rights. And then one that is closer to like our current world where we're striving for equality even if we don't always get it. But anyway, so yes, if you enjoy romance and enjoy dystopian, you can read a romance in a dystopian world without the cheating like is in this book. This was not a very good romance. Not that it was meant to be. We're told on the back the guy's creepy, but you know, for as much time as we're having to spend with her falling in love with him and messing with him, I'd have liked to like him a little bit better and at least like understand why she's all like, oh. My books are available everywhere. If you are a member of Kindle Unlimited, you can read them for free. If you are on Audible, I have several on Audible. in the romance package. So if you're in the romance package, you can read it for free. You can also use your monthly credits. If your library has Overdrive, I have books on Overdrive as well. So feel free to find me any of those places, and also on Smashwords, Kobo, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, basically anywhere that has books, you can find my books. So this has been Jane. I'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.